first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, Friends of Bukit Kiara, for inviting myself and Prof to this Riverside chat. I hope today we can learn something from what has happened here, and we can take away something else every day, not related to the law, but also about the environment and our rights to the environment where we live in. So today, Prof, I think we want to begin by learning a little bit more about yourself. In the CBD, in the Convention on Biological Diversity, where I was first posted, and that was where I first met Prof, the international community have a name for Prof, and it's always the man with the hat. Every time that Prof is not there, they'll come to me and ask, where is the man with the hat? Where is the guy with the hat? Because he's so amazing at bringing many thoughts together, many different nationalities' opinions on the stage to be able to agree on a document. So, but Prof, in life you've worn many hats. You've been a public practitioner, you've been a professor, you've been, and now back to public practice. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how those many hats have shaped you and changed you and molded you to where you are today, Prof. Take it away.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everybody. I think I've changed, as you can see from a hat. I've gone to this cap, and this is based on my hero in the Netflix movie called Peaky Blinders. Those who have seen it will know how they all wear this and bring about a lot of changes in the social environment that they are in. But I've been asked. The other thing I just want to mention as a point is that I came from a very busy part of Petaling Jaya this morning, and as I was going through that busy part, I was choking really because of the intensity of the development and all that, until I entered Taman Rimba Kiara, and then I could breathe again, right? And so it is a green lung, and I'm so glad that I played, albeit a very small part, in saving Taman Rimba Kiara. The only other point I want to make is that I thought it's a riverside chat, but I don't see any river.
There's a lake there, Prof.
Yeah, in any river. But coming back to the point, asking how I shaped my life in this direction, I think it's not so much about myself, but except that I think I shouldn't be talking too much about myself, except that maybe we can draw some lessons from the way in which we can approach our life. So what really begins to matter is as we are brought up in our younger days, the kind of values that our families impart to us and our immediate social environment impart to us. I'm a Sikh by religion, and all Sikhs, especially in small towns, I come from Muar. In small towns, almost invariably, the moment you are, slightly of age, very young, they send you to the temple, where you are then imbued with some universal values that are embedded in the Sikh religion itself. So slowly those values, I think, this is what I'm reflecting because I've been asked to look at this topic, that slowly those values begin to permeate into your life as you go on in life, and as you approach, as you discuss things with your friends and you play around and so on and so forth. And then when I studied law at the University of Singapore at first. When you go to the university, when I went to the university and I was studying law, they talk about all these fundamental freedoms and right to free speech and no arbitrary action and so on and so forth. But then when I looked around in the university and outside in the island of Singapore, we found there was an incongruity between what we were learning and the values we were imbued with and what was going on in the real society. Because in the real society at that time, this was in 1965, right? Long before most of you, including Quek, was born, then suddenly you find, like, if you want to enter university, you require a suitability certificate. And what's a suitability certificate? It is a certificate to make sure that, there's no one in you or your family or your extended family who has ever dissented from the status quo or ever made any comment against the policies that the government is imbuing. And then there was also, when we looked around, we found that there was an attempt to suppress at that time. There was a very important university in Singapore called the Nanyang University, and it had a large component of it was conducted. The courses were conducted in Mandarin, and the government wanted to stop that. And wanted to really, in fact, close it down or to convert it. And then when you looked at the wider society outside, we looked around and found that at that time there was the Internal Security Act. Under the Internal Security Act, there were very eminent figures like Dr. Po Sukai and a few other doctors and journalists who had been detained for 10, 15, 17 years. So that sparked within the student body of which I was a part a movement that this cannot be sustained. You cannot allow this to happen when, on the one hand, our values that we are imbued with from the time we are young, and the learning that we are having in the university with regard to fundamental freedoms, that there was incongruence, and there was a need to fight for that. To restore it so that it goes back to its basal principles. So we were some of us were part of this student body that then began to agitate for debate on these kind of issues with at that time, the Prime Minister at that time was Lee Kuan Yew. He was a very good lawyer, very good debater, and we wanted to challenge him on these issues and have a debate, a public debate on that issue. But of course, at that time, given that climate, what finally happened is that he caught hold of a few of us who were very active in this and banished us from Singapore. We were Malaysians studying in Singapore because there was no law faculty in Malaysia. So he banished us. And that again shaped the thinking that how come when you try to fight for something so basic, so fundamental, like freedom of speech and freedom to education and so on and so forth, how is it that you can, get such a serious reaction from the powers that be, because when you banish people who have committed treason and were committed some kind of violent revolution to overthrow the government and so on. And here we were students. I was 20 years old and my compatriots were about that age too, and we were thrown out of the country. Until now I'm still remain banished. I can't enter Singapore. But so this began to then gel, the point is that these are the kind of to the ordinary people here, to the young people especially here, we got to begin to measure the values with which we are imbued with what's happening outside in society, and to take a kind of a position on that in any which way you can. And then, because I wanted to continue to pursue law, I went to London, to a university in London. And there again, we found that there were so many issues in the wider society that required addressing. Because at the time when I told you these people were detained for 17 years or 20 years and so on and so forth, at that time when they were detained at a time when the British ruled Singapore as well, and they were in charge of internal security and defense and so on, and they were responsible to a large extent for these detentions, which then the Lee Kuan Yew government continued with. So then we took up that the students at that time then set up what they call MSDS, Malaysians and Singaporeans for a Democratic Society, and started and ended up being invited to speak in the House of Commons. That's their parliament. And that created some kind of a reaction in the Singapore government to begin to look anew and say, okay, we cannot be, we got to do something about this, so that to try to release these people. And eventually, some of them after 17, some of them after 25 years under the Internal Security Act, they were released. Now the point that I'm making is very simply this, that we got to measure our life. Okay, we go and study, we go and do so many things, but we got to measure our life and what's going on around us in terms of the values that are very critical and very important. And if you do that, then you begin to see that there is a role in the wider society. I mean, when you are studying, for example, Dr. Wan, when she was studying, I'm sure she never studied about fireflies and all that. But later on, when you begin to think about conservation and so on and so forth, then it widens your knowledge. And then when I came back from London as a, I had graduated from, qualified as a lawyer, came back here, and then you look around you and find that there are so many inequities. I was working in Johor Bahru, and one of the first few cases that I took up was where a large number of people who were servicemen before, in other words, they have been in the military before, and they retired. And after retirement, their pension is so little, then they applied for land because the government was issuing land titles to people, who can qualify on a certain basis. Large number of these people, servicemen who had sacrificed their life for the country and were now fisher folk and so on and so forth, they then decided, they then applied for land. And they used to go to the land office, year in, year out, make the application. The land office will tell them, never mind, we are processing, wait for next year, maybe 6 months' time, and so on. And then when we reached out, some of us as lawyers and as activists reached out to these people and did a bit of discovery, we found that land which had been promised to these service people who had sacrificed their life, as it were, because some died in the service of the country, fighting for in the forces, that land had been already usurped and given to people in high office, including the then Mantri Besar, Osman Saad. And so when we did a land search, we found all this land which was promised to these people and for which they were being led down the garden path every month or 6 months coming, that these people, the land had already been given away to the state legal advisor, to cabinet, to the state cabinet ministers and so on. And so we started a new action, which was very salutary in establishing the locus standi, the right of an ordinary person to challenge the highest echelons of power.
So, Prof, before you go there, in a nutshell, you're trying to say that the values and the experiences you have gone throughout your young life has shaped your experiences and what you choose or what cause you choose to uphold at the present. Am I right?
Yes, and that is an important message that I want to pass, because there are a lot of, I see a large number of young people, very encouraging. No doubt must be due to Hannah Yo's and the KSU, Dr. Nagu's efforts in promoting youth activities and so on and so forth. But that is the point, that you got to not just insulate yourself wherever you are. It doesn't mean you must be in university. Wherever you are, you cannot insulate yourself from the social issues that surround you, and to practice or operationalize those values that, for example, in my case, my mother taught me and my preachers in my Sikh temple taught me, to operationalize it in real terms, because it's insufficient just to do a ritual with regard to religion and not go beyond that. So that is what I think shapes our lives, but we have to begin to recognize that those values that are embedded within us and in society have a meaningful way to resolve some of the society's problems.
Yeah, speaking about operationalize, I think we can agree that Prof himself has operationalized these values and his experiences in the Taman Rimba cause, as well as the Taman Rimba case. As a law student, I remember reading the Trellisis case and thinking, wow, there's so many landmark decisions, there's so many landmark things that have shaped the way we think, from locus standi to the structure plan and all that. And I remember in the Awani interview, you spoke about 5 things. But maybe today, in the interest of time, can you just tell us 3 things that you think are landmark decisions or are landmark points of the case that actually can be brought forward and be used by future lawyers who want to defend the rights of the marginalized or actually defend a green lung in their vicinity?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that we succeeded in establishing in this Taman Rimba Kiara case, the Trellisis case, is the fact that the government and the citizens have a pact, have an arrangement, have a contract between themselves, which is as to how the habitat in and around where you live and live. What is that? Oh, my God. How the habitat in and around you is to be shaped for the future. So for example, in this case, one of the most important points is we said that this place here was identified as a green lung in the structure plan. The other side say no, structure plan is, the government just put forward some policy, you don't have to follow it lah. They just a general policy only. But we said no, this is a contract that has been made between the people, because to get to this plan, to create this green lung, you have gone through a very elaborate democratic process with the participation of the people. So one of the most important things, the first important thing is that this is, when we look at the plans that are being made by the government and the way in which it is done, the first important thing is it's a contract which is binding on the government and cannot be ignored. And secondly, critical to that is that the people are at the center of these plans. It's not the government. The government is just our as it were, they're public servants, right? Carrying out the best interest, advancing the best interest of the public.
Machinery of the people.
Yeah, machinery of the people. So the people are the most important. And the third important point is that anybody can challenge. Anybody can challenge. All the while, there are a lot of legal rules saying, no, you cannot challenge because, you have no interest in this. You're a busybody and so on and so forth. So the third important thing that was established is that every person, every citizen, if you see an illegality, as in this case, because it was a green lung, and then it was being carved out, 13 acres of this were being carved out to be given to a joint venture to develop, ignoring the longhouse, ignoring the fact of the green lung. If you show an illegality, even a single citizen can bring the case. He has the right, what they call local standard, to bring the case. So these were some of the 2 or 3 things that I think the case is established. There are many more, but these are some of the key ones.
Thank you, Prof. I expected a bit longer, but it's okay. There's one point in the case on the public hearing aspect. Maybe, Prof, you can tell us a little bit more about when the government does a public hearing, what is the duty of government then to give reason to the people who they have done a public hearing for when they decide against it? Maybe a little bit on that.
Yeah. One of the most important things this case established, the courts established, is that the process by which you arrive at deciding, which is a green lung and where is going to be mixed development and where is going to be residential, that is one of the most critical things that has to be preserved. Now, all the while, right, so they went back to very fundamental democratic principles. All the while, I know there's a DBKL representative here, so he probably scold me for this, but all the while, these local authorities who are in charge of giving planning permission to developers to build up condominiums in places and so on. The most developed is DBKL, Selangor and Penang. Most of the time what they do is, they just sia only, They said, oh, we must have a public hearing. Never mind, we have a public hearing. So we have a townhouse meeting or whatever. And then they give you 2 or 3 minutes to speak, right? And then you speak, they say, okay, you have objections, right? Okay, good, thank you very much for your speech. And then after that, they just ignore completely the objections, never come back to you to see, how they handle your objections, your very real objections, and then proceed regardless with their plan, which was always there in any event. So one of the important things that this case established is this is wrong, because you have the right that when you make your objections, there is an obligation on the part of the government, of the DBKL, for example, the planning authorities who give this permission, to address those objections and give reasons as to why you are treating the objections in the way. So in other words, you cannot just dismiss it and say, okay, we have given you a public hearing, that's what the law requires, okay, now we proceed, business as usual. So the court said, no, you have to give a response, you have to give a reasoned response, and you must give it immediately at that time. Because normally what the DBKL and the Penang authorities do is, they'll keep quiet, they'll proceed with the plan, and then it's for citizens to try to, challenge it in court, and then they'll come up with some reasons. And those reasons are not the real reasons. They are something that, the lawyers will advise them, no, you cannot say it like this, you have to say it like that, and so on and so forth. The court said, no, that's rubbish. Because you must give your reasons immediately, you must give your exact reasons, and you must give it at the time so that the citizens can decide whether or not you have treated their objections seriously.
Thank you, Prof.